Thank you to the panel. That was a fantastic conversation. And those to the rest of you who are here, thank you for joining us today. My name is Ann Cherry. I'm the Chief of Strategy with Axiom. And I'm going to, taking off on something that Leah just said, refocusing on the bigger picture. We don't have any patients joining us here today, but I'm going to talk about where does value come from and how to of a product's lifetime. So starting off here with a quote from someone who was considered the father of the field of anatomy thousands of years ago. When health is absent, wisdom cannot reveal itself, art cannot manifest, strength cannot fight, wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. And he's describing here the negative space, what's lost when we're not at our best. And every person in this room is engaged in that effort to improve lives. So under your chair, you have a piece of paper. You get a paper, and you get a paper, and you get a paper. And I'd like you to rip your paper from one side to the other. We've all ripped our papers. This is the shape of my grandfather's life, Bob Cresswell. And when he was a young man, he was quite healthy. And then he was drafted into World War II artillery, where he was injured, which made it a lot harder for him when he came back to be a wheat farmer in the deserts of Eastern Oregon. And then when he was around 60, he had colorectal cancer, and he unfortunately passed away about 3 weeks before his daughter gave birth to her first child, which was me. And this is the shape of his life, and this is the shape of what was lost due to lost in health, lost in lifespan, due to illness and injury. And there's a lot of value here. What would my mom have given to have him make it just 4 or 5 weeks longer? Would have been a lot of money, and it would have been worth it. And that's why we're here today. We're here to talk about reducing the amount of suffering that's out there by bringing human ingenuity to bear on the problem of pain and grief. So I'm going to talk today about unmet need. In our work, we don't usually think about just a single life. We think about all the lives that are out there in our region, in our country, or across the globe. And if you stack up all those lives, the suffering in a population is unimaginable. It's unquantifiable because it's contributed to by so many things, by physical and mental health challenges, by illness, things that impact health and lifespan, by injury, by hurricanes. So many things add together to the magnitude of what the population is experiencing. But in our field of biopharma, we do our best to quantify how much need is out there that's caused by a certain illness, a certain group of people who have a particular trajectory of suffering that has a cause that we think we can do something about. But the tools that we use to estimate how much need is out there, it's not static. It's not one certain approach that we take for the whole course of a product's lifespan. And instead, it changes over the course of that product lifespan. And that's what I want to talk about here today. So to understand how much or estimate how much unmet need is out there for a particular illness, there's really 3 fundamental things we need to know. We need to know, does it impact the lifespan? We need to know, how does it impact the quality of life of the people who are suffering from that condition? And we need to know how many people are out there at a given time. And let's talk first about this green arrow, which is how many patients right now out there are suffering from a particular condition, whether it is a cancer or a rare disease or something else that's going on. You may be familiar with the epidemiologist bathtub. What you see here, the number of patients who are diagnosed each year is the incidence. That's the water that's flowing into the bathtub. This is the thing that's easiest to measure because the patients are coming into the doctor's office, they're getting a new diagnosis that's probably being recorded somewhere. So usually it's really easy to get good incidence numbers. But then you also have patients who are recovering. They no longer are going to be in the prevalent population because they no longer have the condition. You also have patients who are passing away. And so the number of patients typically in our industry that we think about when we say, how big is my population? We're looking for the number of patients in the bathtub at any given time, the snapshot prevalence in a particular region. And so there are generally, if we're thinking from a biotech perspective or a pharma perspective, there's 3 ways that we would estimate this. One would be do an epidemiology project, hire someone or hire a team to keep track of all of the nuances and the variables to estimate the prevalent patient population. This is from top to bottom, it's the highest investment to the lowest investment. This is, it costs a lot, but you can get a very accurate answer, and you can get an answer that nobody else has. So it can be custom to you and your needs. The middle level is go talk to DRG Clarivate, right? Or other reports. They have an estimate that they put out, and it is the number of drug treatable patients, and a lot of biopharma relies on that same set of estimates. The third one that's the lowest cost, and if you're sort of just getting into a field or considering many fields, a couple of pharma companies in the last 3 or 4 years have started releasing their proprietary drug treatable patient estimates. And those are now publicly available. They also, we as Axiom have summarized them and included links to those full publications. And these are available in the back for you to take home after this talk, just in case you'd like to have them. This is what Roche, AstraZeneca, and GSK thinks are the number of drug treatable patients in a variety of segments and 6 key tumors. So, party favors. We have those for you in the back here. So now so we've talked, that's sort of how many, oh yeah, Alan. Can I make a comment? Yes, please do.
Just for those of you looking at the bathtub, if you're looking at the bathtub, and you might think, well, that's pretty straightforward, right? And maybe not a lot of people, quote unquote, recover. But as Anne just pointed out, once you start slicing and dicing this into stages, the number of patients who progress to a different line of therapy would be another like evaporation pool, if you will. And so that's why this becomes really, it could become complex pretty quickly, where now how many patients are actually still in the front line, have not moved to second line. I want to know how many patients are there. And that's why these bathtubs are, and the different models you described are particularly helpful.
Like a series of spa tubs where they go from one, they pour into the next, they pour into the next, the patient flow model.
Now that would be a good party favor, sorry.
It would. Maybe next year. So, as you probably know, Axiom works across primarily oncology and rare disease, from preclinical products or even before a company has decided what product they're going to work on, all the way through the clinical development process, go-to-market, launch, lifecycle management, and portfolio management above the individual product level. And all of this type of work at all stages, people ask the question, what's the unmet need? How well do we address the unmet need? But the process and the tools that we use to answer that question actually change a lot over the course of that life cycle. So I'm going to walk you through just a couple examples of different types of questions that people have over the course of that life cycle, and share with you some of the ways that we would estimate what that unmet need looks like for a particular question that someone will have coming into this space. So starting off with someone who says, we're a company that only addresses high unmet need. That's our thing. That's our strategy. We're thinking about getting into oncology. Where should we look? So this is very high level. There's no product at all, but unmet need is the main thing that they're going to be looking for here in this assessment. And so we're looking at 20, 30 tumors potentially. And so in this example, we use entirely secondary sources. So there's no reaching out to physicians to address this at this level because there's so many different tumors. So looking at SEER, understanding the 5-year proportionate survival, looking at the overall response rate. How well are patients responding to treatment in the front line Probably mostly from publications, maybe a little bit of prescribing information, looking at where those benchmarks are for how many are responding, and then incidence, because again, that's the easiest part of the bathtub to measure. And we're at a very high level of just trying to get a handle on which of these are big opportunities and which of these are likely to be more niche opportunities. And this same kind of question, the same kind of approach can be taken in rare disease. So we actually had a client come to us and they had a list of 100 rare diseases. And they said, we think there's probably some good ones in here somewhere. Here are 3 strategic priorities. Which ones are at the top? Pick us the best 5 out of these 100. And when you're working at that scale, when you're at the level of trying to understand 100 different diseases, the types of information that you can use are necessarily going to be proxies in some way. And so in this case, the proxy that we ended up using for unmet need fed into all of the strategic goals that this client was looking at. But it was estimated number of patients, the age at which the disease onset, and the age of death. So you had the duration of the patient suffering from the disease, and you had the impact on lifespan. So to get back to our piece of paper here. And that then fed into the degree of synergy with their other products, the profit they could make in goal number 2, which was proprietary, so I'm not sharing it today. And you could see then how all 100 of these diseases shaped up. Again, no primary research, right? We're still in the pre-product stage. We haven't even chosen our indication yet. So let's move one step forward then. We're about to head into the clinic. We got really cool preclinical data on 2 different indications. And we think that it probably is going to work in both of these. And we need to understand if there's an important difference between these or if they should both be included in our first in human study, or which one should we prioritize. Here, the role of unmet need is not the be-all end-all anymore. This is a very early stage situation here. We really need to be thinking about our scientific rationale. Where do we think that it is most likely our product is going to work? How strong is the data? What does the preclinical look like? As well as clinical feasibility. Are we going to be able to run this clinical trial? How many patients are we going to need? Are we going to be able to recruit it? And in addition to that, we have unmet need. And so unmet need is only one component of a broader set of analyses that have to happen in order to make a decision around early prioritization of the indication that a product might go after at this sort of first in human stage. And at the next example we have here is flipping from the biotech side to the buy side. We're running a due diligence, and we are a pharma company. We're trying to understand how much is this product likely to make? How successful is it likely to be? All of a sudden, we're much less focused on the landscape writ large and much more focused on the product itself. This is a big change in the way that the unmet need is thought about and evaluated. Now we have a target product profile. So we have a TPP. We're starting to ask a different kind of question. It's not just how big is the unmet need in this disease, but it's of the unmet need in this disease, how much could this particular product profile address? And how likely would it be that physicians are actually going to choose this product, which is a very big pivot from the way that unmet need has been thought about up until this point. This is one of the spots where we start getting input from physicians. So on the previous one, we might have had a few KOL conversations. Here we start to talk to not only key opinion leaders, folks who are going to be able to describe that unmet need qualitatively and help us understand how it's evolving in the future, but also some high volume prescribers, because we want to know what's going to be happening in the community setting or wherever else the product is actually going to be used, and understand, is this product profile actually going to be something that benefits the patients at the end of the day, or is there something wrong with it that might prevent it from being used in one setting or another, or by one stakeholder group or another? And then moving forward, closer to launch, heading into launch, something like a demand study. This is where we have moved fully away from secondary research. Here we want to be, instead of looking or talking to a dozen physicians, if we've identified 3 different stakeholder groups, we as the pharma company are going to want to maybe run studies with surveys with hundreds of potential users, and really get as much specificity as we can, understanding how they're going to use this product, in what circumstances, for which patients, so that we can make the most accurate forecast possible as we are heading into launch and understanding what type of uptake we can expect to see. And this is where you get very segmented in terms of the prescriber types. Is it KOLs? Is it academic? Is it community? Is it urologists? Is it nurse practitioners? Who are all of those individuals who could be using this, and making sure you understand the dynamics that are driving each of those. So that's sort of the full product life cycle. The last example I have for you here today is once the product is approved, we've got our first indication, but we want to expand into more indications. We have reason to believe this thing could work in other tumor types or in other segments within our tumor itself. So this is an example where we looked at unmet need levels in various segments in 2 different tumors. This one is sort of an interesting match. We use more KOLs, not quite as high volume prescribers. We're trying to understand the future landscape again, but we already have our TPP. This one's sort of in between the early stage development and the later stage development. So then, last content slide here. If we think about these different types of patterns, how we understand unmet need and how it evolves over the course of the life cycle. I've got the life cycle here from top to bottom, from before we have any product all the way through inline and portfolio. The role of the unmet need and assessment at the very early stage, particularly the early products, is going to be, it's one of many factors that they need to understand. And as that product matures, it becomes more and more important. The type of data that you're relying upon goes from almost entirely secondary research, SEER and papers and publicly available sources, through needing to understand much, much more about what the prescribers believe to be true and how they're going to use this product, up until you get to the sort of indication expansion where you might need to go back to some of your secondary sources. The overall scope of the primary sample is going to expand. It's going to balloon as you get closer to launch, and the type of questions and the type of people that you're interviewing is going to get larger as you understand more specificity about the prescribers. And then the degree of product focus. At the beginning, we don't care what the product is. It's anything in this field. And then as we develop our TPP, we get more and more specific. And the segment specificity. Initially, we're looking at the disease writ large. By the end, we need to really understand what the narrow population is. And a couple of places where we can see that this is useful. One of the things, sometimes if a product has some kind of Achilles heel, there's something wrong with it, often that can sneak through all the way up until we get to the TPP stage. Because the way we think about unmet need is at the disease level until we have that TPP. But if there's something concerning that's going to prevent it from being successful, until we start testing that TPP, that can be missed. Sort of the converse of that is, if there's a product that's going to address unmet need in a very small segment, sometimes that product can be undervalued in the early stages of development, because there you're saying, oh, the unmet need in this condition is relatively low, but it turns out that if you look specifically in the segment that this is going to be effective in, it might be higher. So at the end of the day, the yardstick that we use to measure unmet need, it changes over the course of product development. And understanding how it's going to be measured in upcoming stages and how it's been measured in earlier stages can help us shore up potential weaknesses in the product and help us prepare the most compelling narrative for the stage of development that's coming next. So I leave you with your torn paper. When we alleviate suffering, we build value. And that's why we do what we do. We're heading into a 10-minute break.